Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne. Welcome you to my channel. Thank you very much for finding me. And if you are new here, I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia, without a greenhouse or grow lights or humidifiers. Just me and them struggling on either inside or outside or not at all. So, plant lovers of the world, if that sounds like your bag, hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday and I am a complete amateur. Everything I say should be taken with a pinch of salt. But today, plant lovers, it is September here in Australia and in the Southern Hemisphere. That means the first month of spring. And I thought, you know what? There was quite a lot of blossoming activity going on. Why not do a What's in Bloom in Spring video for you today? And it has been a long and somewhat cold and somewhat miserable winter here in Melbourne, starting in early autumn. Anyway, so I think finally the thermostat is beginning to turn up. And this week actually is going to be quite warm. So there we go. Lots of activity, lots of things happening. And I'm also going to make a video about spring tasks, which I'll make in the next few weeks and post in the next few weeks. But we'll begin with what's in bloom. And as it's spring, yes, it is the Aussie Dendrobium blooming time. Now, it's a curious season at the moment. So some of mine have been very early, like this little dwarf Dendrobium kingianum. I've made a video about this one, but we'll get to that in a minute. And some are very late. And my Dendrobium delicatum, which I've made many videos about, is only just opening. My other large kingianums just opening. And my Dendrobium speciosum is only just beginning to form its buds. So that's going to be very late this year. I don't know, maybe something is crazy with the whole flowering cycle and the temperatures in Melbourne, who knows. But anyway, this one is a new to me orchid, which I only bought a couple of weeks ago, and it is a species called, let me get the tag out that's stuck, Dendrobium Gracelicoli. I don't know if you can see that there. A beautiful species orchid, a little finer, so quite fine canes, and a smaller sort of flower, quite arched and beautiful. And I don't know if you can see, but the flowers are quite spotted, both behind and in front. A charming little thing with a really beautiful, light, lemony, high note fragrance. Really, really beautiful. So this time of year, you would normally be awash with the Australian dendrobiums. But as I said, for me, not so. But every orchid fair that I've been to over the last month has been packed with them all in bloom. So other people in Melbourne are on season, but I'm not for some reason, but never mind. Anyway, so this is this one, new to me. I had nothing to do with the blooms, but here it is in spring, and I'm looking forward to this billowing forth and blooming for me well next year. So we will catch up with this one again next year. And as I mentioned, the other thing that will be in bloom at this time of year would be Dendrobium kingianums. And this is a beautiful little dwarf one that I bought probably a year ago actually. And as you can see, a really unusual form. It sort of produces these quite squat, short pseudobulbs which lay flat, looking much more like a succulent, perhaps, than an orchid. And that's how it propagates. So the canes are actually sort of quite loose on the surface, if you know what I mean. So they sort of fall and then produce cakeys and fall and sort of creep around and form quite a mat, a tangled web. Anyway, but the thing that I love about this is the beauty of the flower. So this very, very white with this real splash of mauve in the middle. A fabulous little dendrobium. And it is a Dendrobium kingianum, and it is called Lauren. Dwarf form, won't get much bigger really, but it will form quite a mat, so easy to divide as time goes by. And once again, that very light sort of lemony, jonquilly fragrance. A beautiful orchid for this time of year. And the Australian dendrobiums do like that seasonal shift in cool temperatures, autumn to winter. They do need good winter light, sunlight, to stimulate the flowers. But the more direct light they get, the more burnt both the pseudobulbs and the leaves will get, which won't hurt them per se. They'll just look terrible. They'll still bloom wonderfully. These are a very tough orchid. So in cultivation, you've got to kind of find that sweet spot. So I think direct morning light, then a little bit of dappled protection from the hot afternoon sun if you're in Australia. Elsewhere though, as much strong direct light as you can give. There you go. Australian Dendrobium kingianum looking fabulous. All right, next cab off the rank is this beauty, which is an Odontoglossum Pulchellum. Now, isn't that, there you go, I don't know if you can see that somewhat tired tag, but Isn't it a beauty? Really, really lovely, very, very white and quite waxy flowers. And once again, a really delicate, beautiful fragrance. Now, like many orchids, particularly sort of Oncidium alliance types of orchids, this one blooms from the base of a newly matured pseudobulb. I have made a video about this before, which I will link, and I had many more flower spikes last time, but it didn't flower last year. Because, plant lovers, I had moved it and it was just in a little too much shade. I just don't think it had enough light. So this is a lowish light orchid. It doesn't want bright indirect light, it wants indirect light. It is a cool cold grower, so it doesn't love the heat either. So you need to kind of keep it cool and moist, but light-ish, if that makes any sense. But a very, very beautiful flower, very long lasting, and a beautiful fragrance, and flowers late winter, early spring as we are now. So it's a really lovely flower to have at this time of year. It's a Central American orchid and from very high elevations. Hence, it likes a sort of a cooler, moister environment. But there we go, Odontoglossum Pulchellum. A very, very pretty, very simple orchid, but well worth growing, particularly if you live in a cold climate like me. All right, next cab of our spring flowering rank is this beauty. Now, I made a video about this probably a month ago, and look, all of the flowers are still very, very beautiful, looking very fresh and still very alive. Now, it is a Epidendrum Centripetalum. It does have two names, but the Epidendrum one is the correct one now, according to Q. And look at that. Isn't it a beautiful mauve colour? There we go. Let's have a closer look. Really stunning. Quite unusual. Not a massive grower, as many epidendrums are. This is probably about the height it's ever going to be. But it does have this unusual growth habit of forming sort of aerial roots and plantlets at the top of each cane. Now, you tend to assume that when something cakeys up, it's perhaps not getting enough light, or it's getting too much water, or it's making a last bid to survive. But this is the growth habit of this particular orchid. I've seen some pictures of quite mature specimens, and it's just this tangled mess of aerial roots and plantlets, but they all flower. So there you go. That's what it wants to do. And I've just noticed a new growth starting to come from the bottom, and that makes me very happy. So it flowers from the tip of new growth, but you can get a new growth from an old growth, if that makes sense, because it almost branches out. So you will only get flowers from the new growth. However, that new growth can occur on an old growth. So there you are, a bit like a fuchsia actually, which only flowers from new growth. But anyway, a beautiful orchid, still in bloom, no fragrance from it, but a really fantastic colour. And these flowers have lasted over a month so far and don't look like they're going anywhere fast. Okay, let us slide that baby over there and then look at this. Now, where can we get the flower into the shot? There we are. Look at that. Isn't that the most fabulous, spiky, spidery flower? Now, there are 2, 3 other spikes, so it's yet to fully open, but I wanted to show you this one because it's stunning, and it is, let me get the tag for you, Ada keiliana. There you go. Or is it Ada? Ada, Ada. Ida, strange enough, is a classical Greek character. Well, actually, no, historical figure. And keiliana was named after a Mr. Keil, Mr. Keil's orchid. Anyway, but what's perhaps most thrilling about this, now this comes from Colombia and Venezuela, and it's a cool to warm grower, so I keep this one indoors all year. Now you might see a bit of concertina leaves because naughty Matthew perhaps wasn't as diligent with his watering, but look at those flowers. So you can see very, very similar to Brassica type flowers. And you can also perhaps see, now this is a species orchid, but you can perhaps see how this has been used in many of the hybrids that you might find in those complex intergeneric hybrids of the Oncidium alliance with those very spidery flowers. But this is the species. So the colour perhaps isn't stunning. It's sort of like a natural ochre colour perhaps with this very, very pale lemon lip. But very, very dramatic flower and fragrant. And you know what it smells like? It smells like jasmine tea, the most delicious jasmine tea. So I am thrilled that this has bloomed for me. It's the first time it's bloomed. I bought this plant over a year ago, and each of the newly matured pseudobulbs has got 2 flower spikes, which is great. So a vigorous grower, as you can see. It is one, well, some Oncidium type orchids can manage a little sloppy watering, whereas others really need, you've got to be on the money in terms of not allowing it to dry out too much, particularly when it's growing. So I just, didn't get my eye on the ball particularly well with Ida as she was growing her new growths, hence the crinkles leaves, which do linger to remind you of your poor orchid care for quite some time. Anyway, let's forget about that and just focus on the beautiful flowers, which I'm really thrilled to have opened. Now, when this, beautiful. When all 4 spikes have opened, I'll do a standalone video on that one because it's a stunner and I'm so excited it bloomed. Next up, a couple of very pretty Masdevallia. Now, I again cannot take any credit for this one or this one being in bloom because I did buy them in bloom a couple of weeks ago from an orchid fair. This is a cultivar called Impact, and this one is a cross with no name, and it is a cross between Supernova and Red Hot Chili. There we go. And it is a very, very beautiful colour. Now, the interesting thing is, when I made a film about the orchid haul when I bought this, and I kept it in the car. And although it's winter, obviously the car's quite warm, and it wasn't in sun, but the car was warm. By the time I got home, after running a few errands, that flower was incredibly wilted and looked like it was going to die. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, the minute I put it outside in cool temperatures, and it was already quite moist, but just those cool temperatures, the flower perked right back up. So if you needed any proof that Masdevallias are cool growers that do not like the heat, leave it in the car for a bit and you'll soon find out it doesn't like hot conditions. And I must be doing something right because there is another little flower coming out. Now, I haven't repotted them because firstly, I just want them to acclimatise to my conditions. And secondly, never a good idea to repot something while it's in bloom. So I'm just going to wait until those flowers are gone. So that is that one, a very, very beautiful pink colour. And just to show you closely, that one, which is that beautiful sort of golden orange copper. Isn't it a stunning flower? So Masdevallias in bloom this spring here in Melbourne. Now, spring would not be complete without peonies. Look at those. Aren't they beautiful? Now, I made a repotting video about peonies, which I'll link below. And in that video, one of my viewers said, "Oh, have you watched Howard's Orchids out of Cambridge in Britain?" And I said, "No, never heard of his channel." Anyway, I went to Howard's Orchids and it is fantastic. He's got an intermediate greenhouse in Britain, and he grows many of the things I grow, but also things that I haven't tried. But he also has a really great Peony video. So I'll put a link to Howard's channel below. Really fantastic. Not dissimilar types of orchids to me, but different conditions, obviously, but really fantastic. Anyway, this Peony is stunning, and it is called Tongariro. And the bulbs came from Jane Tonkin of Tonkin's Bulbs, who I made a video with because she is a professional grower of peonies. So I'll link that video below and above so you can go and have a look. Her website goes live about 3 times a year when each sort of group of bulb is dormant, because that's when she sends them out. And she only ships within Australia, and she can ship to all the Australian quarantine states. So there you are. But unfortunately, Australian botanical growers cannot ship anything overseas. So unfortunately, if you're watching elsewhere, you'll have to find another source of peonies. But look at that. Isn't the flower absolutely delicious? So I'm very pleased. I bought 3 bulbs. I have 3 flowers. I've had my ups and downs and trials and tribulations with peonies, but I think I've got my game together now. So let's see. We'll have to touch back with these next year and see how the plants have progressed. In the meantime, sensational blooms from this peony. Another little orchid still in bloom that I have made a video about is this Paphiopedilum. Look at that. Brilliant. Now, Paphs only, well, the ones I have only have a flower once a year. I mean, I have heard people say that some Paphiopedilum hybrids can bloom more than once in a year, but I have yet to experience that here in Melbourne, but never mind, I'm sure it's true. But anyway, this one is absolutely gorgeous. I bought it as a seedling about 3 years ago. It's taken quite a while to get to this point. I've made a full video about it, so watch that. Get all my frustrations with this. Now, it is quite a complex mix of Western Sky Snow Cloud, spicerianum, and Turban, I think. Those are the Paphiopedilums that have been crossed to make this. But anyway, isn't it a beauty? It's got a second crown, which developed early this year, actually, which has a little nib in the middle, which is either just a leaf or another flower bud, which would make me very happy. The great thing, though, about Paphs is that the flowers do last a long time. Now, this one has been open probably a month, and I might well get, well, hopefully another 2-3 weeks out of it. Who knows? Anyway, it's still looking very, very healthy now. Fantastic cooler grower, and I'm thrilled it flowered for me, and a wonderful spring bloom. Now this one, an oddity and a tricky plant to display, but look at that. Dendrobium secundum. What an odd flower it is, isn't it? Nickname, the toothbrush, as you can see why. So the flower, well, the raceme is really a series of quite small flowers that open sequentially. So you can see that each one is quite small and quite beautiful and quite dense, and then they open as the inflorescence matures down the spike there. So quite beautiful, quite unusual. So this fabulous dendrobium has quite a wide distribution throughout sort of Southeast Asia and then across into Australasia actually. So sort of from Myanmar and Laos all the way down the Malay Peninsula, across Malaysia, Indonesia, across into New Guinea. So that's a huge range of habitats. Now it is more of a lower land orchid that does grow in drier forests. So it does have that wet, dry seasonality. So it's one of those dendrobiums that does need to be very dry in winter, almost not watered at all. I occasionally water it, but not much. Then when you see the new growth emerging in spring, that's when you begin watering and feeding. So at this point, I can't see any new growths. And I actually just gave it a little bit of a water this morning. And I might water it once every 3-4 weeks in winter. On a warm day. So that's my rule. Now, it's an unusual orchid, as you can see, very, very pendulous canes, and it flowers from last year's matured deciduous cane. So the old canes lose their leaves and it flowers from the tip. So again, the idea is you need to grow as many canes as you can because you get more flowers. So last year, I had this mature cane, which has flowered for me, but since then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 canes have matured. They've all still got their leaves, but some of them, as you can see, are just starting to turn and drop, which means next winter, spring, hopefully those are the canes that will flower for me. So we'll have to see. Anyway, it is a warm grower, so I do keep this inside all winter. I did put it out in summer just to get, some real heat going. I may have brought it in a little too late. I did get a little bit of damage to some of the ends of these canes. So yeah, do have to be careful with that. But one beautiful flower this year, so that's okay. We'll have to see if all of these canes bloom for me next season, including the one that was damaged at the end because I think I got it too cold and wet before I brought it in autumn. Anyway, a really unusual flower and a really unusual orchid. Now, of course, spring in Melbourne would not be complete without Cymbidiums. Now, mine have just gone over actually. However, this one I did just buy. So again, I did not have anything to do with the blooming of this. And I don't really love the very large, round, waxy hybrids that you can find. But there was just something about the shape of this flower and its gentle color that I really loved. And it's fragrant. It has that sort of slightly bitter lemon fragrance that many Cymbidium species do anyway, like Tracianum for example. But what a beautiful orchid, isn't it stunning? So funnily enough, this morning I just went to the Cymbidium Society of Victoria's spring show to see all the Cymbidiums, and they're all in full flower and looking glorious. Mine have been and gone basically, so there you go. It's odd, isn't it, how you can be in the same city and different growers have different growing conditions which stimulate their plants differently. But anyway, spring in Melbourne, definitely Cymbidium time, and this is a no ID hybrid. A beautiful one at that. And the last cab off our spring flowering rank is this Coelogyne, and it is Coelogyne Unchained Melody. Isn't it absolutely beautiful? Now this is the Alba form, which means white. Strangely enough, it's white, but again, a very lovely light spring jonquil sort of fragrance, which is appropriate as they're all in bloom at the moment too. So this has 2 spikes for me this year. There we go. There's the other one, not quite open yet. And there's that one looking absolutely stunning. Very vigorous plant, as you can see. Happy as Larry in these fabulous pierced pots. I have made my own and made my own how to drill your terracotta pot video, so I'll link that as well. But Coelogynes do like this type of potting. But what a glorious plant. Now, the Coelogynes I grow are the Himalayan cooler growing Coelogynes, and they love Melbourne's weather. You do have to water them all winter though. Although I keep this outside all year with cold winter minimums, it still does need moisture all year. So don't believe the hype that will say they want to be dry in winter, because they won't bloom well for you. Anyway, that's my little learning. So Coelogyne Unchained Melody, absolutely beautiful. The Alba form with really a little bit of lemon in the middle on this white flower. A stunning, stunning plant. Very happy. This is the 2nd year it's bloomed for me. I've had this plant now over 2 years, but it's grown tremendously and flowered very well for me. So I am very, very happy with that. Well, there we are, plant lovers. Spring in Melbourne and everything that's going on. The Masdevallias, Dendrobiums, Odontoglossums, Ida looking fabulous. This mad thing here. Peonies and Paphiopedilums and the Australian Dendrobium kingianum. Absolutely beautiful. Well, I hope if you're in the southern hemisphere, spring is treating you well. If you're in the northern hemisphere, autumn is on the way, and I hope different things are happening for you there in the orchid world. But for me, I now need to go off and start doing my spring tasks, which are quite a lot, and I will make a video about that, which I'll publish in the next couple of weeks. There's a lot to do, a lot to review, a lot of learnings and understandings, and a few things to put in the compost bin. Anyway, join me for that epic. Remember, I do post every week, so if you think that your growing conditions are similar to mine and that my ramblings are useful, do hit subscribe. But in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy the fragrance of these, and I very much look forward to seeing you next week.